Okay, we're going to learn a bit about the hand plane and how to adjust it. This is mostly for any students who are curious to try it. You can struggle if your hands aren't strong enough to turn the dial, but you, as a teacher or a sub, you will need to be able to adjust this for the grade 7 and 8s in the afternoons. So these are hand planes. They're found in the cabinet here along the bottom, and they consist of a sole of the hand plane and a blade that protrudes through this little slot. As you slide that over the wood, it slices and cuts the wood. Now there's a lot of sensitive little dials and levers on here that adjust the angle and the depth of this blade. I'll take it apart for you quickly so you can see that. There's a cap iron that goes on that holds the blade assembly on here. Now the blade is a two-part assembly. There's the blade itself that has the bevel on it here that creates the cutting edge, and then there is what's called a chip breaker, which is kind of stabilizes and the main blade's edge, and it's brought down just right maybe a millimeter away from the cutting edge, and you can adjust that by loosening this screw if you have to take this apart, but usually this should be set for you. To reassemble this, you carefully set the plane with the little screw down. Try not to bang the edge onto the metal corners. And what has to happen is this screw has to drop into this little slot, this little recess right there in the plane. So you carefully set that in and wiggle it around until that drops in. The other thing you might have to move is this lateral adjustment lever until it pops into place. So it has to drop in on these two little teeth right there, go in this slot. That screw goes down in the slot underneath, and this lateral adjustment lever has to also fit into this groove. So there's a bunch of little things that have to line up. You have to check here to make sure that the blade is actually touching this part of the plane, which is called the frog. There has to be no gap there. A lot of times it won't work. If it's up like this, then something is holding it. You have to wiggle it around until it drops right down. The lever cap goes on here, and you push the cam lock down and that locks the blade in. Well, now you have it in, but now you don't have it adjusted. So the blade can be at an angle this way and be cutting on one side and not on the other. It can also be too deep or not deep enough. What I like to do is sight right down here to look and see the blade. Right now I can see that the blade is sticking up a little bit on this side, but it's not on this side. So I can move the lateral adjustment lever, which is this one, to make it so it's parallel to the sole. And I usually look at it. You can feel it when you cut as well, but I look at it. So right now it's to the point where it won't be making a cut. If I put a board in the vise and try it, it might cut, but it probably won't. And this is a good spot to start. If you see the blade is too far out, you want to back this dial off. Counterclockwise will raise the blade, and clockwise will send it down into the wood further. So right now, what we know the blade is below the surface. So that's fine. No problem. That's a good place to start, because we're going to spin it clockwise, and you will notice there is an area in here where it's really easy to spin, and that's the slack zone, I call it. It's an area between adjustments. There's a little lever in here that moves, and it pushes on the blade and raises it and lowers it, and in between those two adjustments it just spins freely. So you want to spin it clockwise until you start to feel some resistance. Then you know you're starting to change the blade's depth. You'll start by turning it like a half a turn at once and then try again. No cut, another half turn. No cut, another half turn. Might be starting here soon. Another half turn. There, now we're getting a cut. And actually that's more cut than I want. That's pretty thick. So I might even back it off a little bit. Go through the slack zone and just put a little bit of back it off just a bit. There we go. That's a nice cut. But it might be only cutting on one side. So you may need to play with the lateral adjustment lever to get it lined up. not cutting, so I'm going to take past the slack zone, give it a little bit. And there might be something on the bottom sometimes too. There we go. So that's the nice cuts they should stick to your hand with static electricity. Just thin little pieces. And you should hear it kind of making a nice sound, nice and high. If it's sticking down too far, it'll be very hard to push. And it'll just kind of jump and push through and it'll make a sound. You want it to be hissing right through there. So you got to back that off by turning it counterclockwise to get the right adjustment. So it takes a little bit of practice, but you basically back it off until there's no cut and then slowly advance it until you get the cut you want. No cut, turn it, no cut, turn it, no cut, turn it. There's my cut right there. And that's where I stop, and that's where I do most of my cutting, all right? That's how you adjust the hand plane.